In this video, we're going to take a look at the knees. The knees tend to have a bouncy quality to them, and that's definitely something that we'll want to get rid of. You see all the pops that are happening in these knees? I haven't gone back and refined both sides of the character, but you get a pretty decent sense from this. But you can see how poppy these things are. And right there, you can see all this in and out sort of pop back and forth. All of these where you go bent, straight, and then bent, that's going to be really noticeable in the animation. But another thing that you want to watch out for is the knee moving quickly between two positions and then slowing way down and then speeding way up. That one is a little harder to find, and we'll just sort of play around with this and figure out what we need to do to make this thing look better. So I'm okay with this for the most part with the lift off. I think it might be coming up on the toe a little early. Let me just delay this just a little bit. So I'm going to go here and just delay that out a frame. So I'm going to leave the toe flat on the ground to there, which means that probably I'm going to need to come back on this frame and fix the heel ball. There's so much of this that's going to be to do with heel ball, but some of it is going to be to do with the height of the hips as well. So these things together are your primary places that you're going to be messing with to get this to look right. So here, it's pretty good. This doesn't need to be perfectly straight. It depends on what you're doing with the passing position. But in my case right here, I can see that there's a strong bend, and then it's straight, and then it stays straight. So what I would say is, this is a place where we're going to pick up that pop because there's a lot of motion between those two right there, but not as much here. So what I'll do is I'll try to balance that a little bit by taking this frame and making it bend just a little bit more, right? So this way I'm softening that transition between those. Right, so there's still a bit of a pop into this one. I would say that the pop on this one is probably not to do with the hip height, but probably something that I'm going to need to mess with on that heel ball, just to bring up that heel ball a little more aggressively. So I apologize if this thing is going off screen. I'm trying to frame both of them up so you can see everything that's going on, but I keep losing sight of it. Um, so let's see here. So here we've got a pretty significant pop, and that is good for the heel ball. I want that heel ball flat right there, but maybe here. Maybe this I want to come up a little bit more aggressively. Now you can do this through the graph editor if there's good reason to do so. But you can also just add in other keys. Different people have different preferences on this. It's perfectly fine for you to take heel ball and drive that up until you get a little bit of a bend, right? That's perfectly fine. Or I can do that with the curves, and that's perfectly fine also. What I want to do though is use whichever method. I'm going to try with curves. I tend to think that curves give you a little bit smoother animation if you can get it right in the curves. It typically gives you a little bit smoother interpolation. Right, so I would say that the knees may just be locked out a little more than I want them to be here. So at frame 12, I want to add a little bit more heel ball into this just to keep it from being quite so locked straight. Now you can see right in the middle here, we run into a problem. Like it's bending too much right here, and then it straightens back out. So when you have that kind of back and forth from, you know, bent to straight and then back to bent, again, that's where you're going to see that pop show up. So let me just find a place in here that looks like it's getting too straight. And so this is a place where the curves are probably just not going to allow me to get this exactly the way I want. So I'll just come in here and just key it out. And I want to make sure that between these two, it looks nice and clean, which it does. Like that's a good transition. The knee moves a similar amount between each frame, and the bend changes a similar amount each frame. Um, that's not bad at this point. Just adding that one thing in there made a pretty big difference. Now that right there is a strange motion. See how the knee just comes straight down and then it progresses back? That's something that's going to be, you'll see that as a glitch in the animation. So watch what's going on here with the knee. So the knee moves backwards, backwards, just down, and then down and back, and then just back. right? So they're like you got to even these things out so that that knee, I'm just looking at this black part, creates a path that's like that makes sense. So in this case, this needs to move back more. The way that I move the knee back more is reduce some of this heel ball. Now you have to be careful because you don't want the heel ball to look like it's bouncing all over the place. It needs to also have like a general progression of lifting off and lifting up. It shouldn't go up, down, up, down, up, down, or else that'll look like it's all over the place. But I'll just see if this is enough to even us out a little bit. So it's down but back a little bit. We could sort of play around with that just a bit more. Again, we don't want to go to lock it out straight. Right, so this one here, at this point, this has to be adjusted to have a little more bend in it, or else the previous frames are going to look really weird. And this one here, this should have a little less bend in it. So again, you can come through the curves, or you can just key these things in. Once you get to this level of detail, I would say just kind of keying these things in can give you the most control. It's just sometimes the most difficult to come back and deal with. But you can see that now that knee seems to have a more stable direction. It doesn't stop moving at any point. Obviously that obviously that's fully broken. This is really, really broken here because we stopped the toe from moving. So I'm just going to roll up that heel ball until we have a very similar angle to this one. So I'm looking at the angle of the knee, and I'll just look at what's going on with that position of the knee. Okay, and so at this point, I would say that we're coming up on the toe. Let me just see what's going on with the toe here. So it's starting up onto that toe. So we could play around with this, either change the interpolation here, which is perfectly valid, or we could do that still in the heel ball. Let me just see what happens if I push this up. This gives me an easy way to get that to look pretty good. And I think that's generally that's working for me. So I'm just watching the progress of that knee. Okay, that feels pretty good. So it's really hard to tell these knee pops until you just play the thing. So I'm just going to play it, and we're going to see what we have going on. So it still has a lot of pops on the front of that motion, but at the back it's getting better. So it's tough. There's a lot to tackle in these things. Um, and it takes time to get these things right. But those are the main controls, and obviously, the specifics that you need to do on your particular model are going to be different than what I need to do. But it's a balance in how quickly you're ascending and descending here. So tweaking these curves is going to have a great deal of effect of what's going on with the knees, but also the toe and then the heel ball on this. Those are your primary ways that you're going to look through and get rid of this bounce. It can be a real chore to get rid of it. And I'll just spend just a few more minutes doing this, but I don't want this video to be forever long. And again, it's not the most useful for you just to see what happens on mine. It's going to be different than yours. But again, the process that I'm using here is I'm watching the knee, and from frame to frame, I want to see what's happening with that knee. How much movement does it have? How much is it changing? The angle changing? How much does the distance change? All that kind of stuff. So that right there, I would probably read as a pop. So I would put a little bit more bend into that one, I think. There's a big move here and then a small move here. So this frame in the middle here, I would just try to balance that. This is the main idea that you're doing with this. And you can see here that this thing's all keyed to heck through here, and that's just kind of the way it's going to be. So I would just bring that up a little bit more, something like this. And again, you're just trying to balance that so that you don't have such a dramatic change between two. Right, so now that feels like a nice halfway point. You see those feel more even in their distribution. And again, you're just kind of looking at how much do they move. There's a pretty big change here, but I think that is largely because it's starting to come up onto the toe, and that move forward is starting from that point. So again, I'll just kind of watch that foot. It's got a little bit left, but that's getting close. This is not bouncing nearly as much as it was, and it just takes the time of going back through, really paying attention to detail, like how much is that thing moving. And again, for the last time, I know I've said this a bunch of time through this video, but just in case, or this series, but just in case this is the only video you're watching, don't mess with the knees. Do not spend time on this until you're really satisfied with the rest of the animation, because this removing this knee bounce can take a very long time to make it look really nice and clean. But if you change anything else, if you change anything about the hips or the foot motion, you're probably going to have to go back and make quite a bit of adjustment to the knees to get them to work properly again. So do this last. Let this be sort of the final thing that you clean up. And I'll leave this series right there.